Greetings, YouTube. So today I'm coming at you with something different. Today we are going to be talking about the Super7 Ultimates Thundercats. I've jumped into a new hole, as you can see, but I'm going to discuss these today, and we're going to talk about how you can get some if you're interested, and I'll give you a tiny little bit of history about the Thundercats in case you're somebody who maybe didn't watch them as a kid, and then we'll look at the figures. So Super7 is a kind of smaller toy company. They have licenses with a lot of nostalgic properties like Ninja Turtles, Thundercats, Silverhawks even, and they've even ventured into G.I. Joe recently. I did make a video about the Super7 G.I. Joe releases maybe it was last year or a few months back. Those weren't for me. At least at the time I didn't have any interest in them, and I'm still more of a classified person, but I do see how they could, appeal to some people. This Thundercat line is very similar to Masters of the Universe Classics, which was an older line for He-Man and such. The build of the figures is very reminiscent of that. And these new Thundercat figures are basically a reboot of the Thundercat figures by Mattel from back in the day. All right. So real quick, we'll talk about the Thundercats as a property, talk about the cartoon, and then we'll look at the figures. Okay, so a real quick, brief history of the original Thundercat show. So when we first see the Thundercats, they are escaping the planet Panthera. Panthera is their home planet, and something has happened that Panthera is being destroyed. It's literally blowing up like Krypton. And the Thundercats are escaping in their spaceships, and they have a flagship, and then there's other ships that have under Thunderians in them, and they're trying to escape the planet. They're being chased by the mutants of Plundar. Mutants are animal-like, anthropomorphic men who look like dogs or lizards or monkeys or whatever the case. And the mutants destroy some of the ships, so some of the Thunderians are lost, and they attack the flagship, but the Thundercats that are on the flagship are able to ward off the mutants and send them packing. Their spaceship is damaged, and they find a way to get everything together, and they wind up landing on what's called Third Earth, which is a version of Earth, I guess post-apocalyptic. It's not like how it is these days. It's more of a wild world with different types of creatures living there, and that's where they have most of their adventures. So that's basically the show in a nutshell. It goes from very sci-fi to sword and sorcerer, and then to a mix of both genres, sword and sorcerer and science fiction. All right, so let's take a look at the figures themselves. Okay, so what we have on display here are 5 of the main characters of the show. There are obviously more of them. I haven't gotten them yet. They'll be here in the next week or two. But here we have Mamra, who is the main bad guy, and he looks very weak and, unassuming in this form, but he has another form where he turns into this huge, godlike, evil demon sorcerer. You have Panthero, who is a Thundercat. You have Lionel, who is the Lord of the Thundercats, or the leader. You have Jackalman, and this is an example of one of the mutants. And then we have Jaga. Jaga was, and on the first episode, he was the one that was, the leader, and he was trying to get the Thundercats away from Panthera to continue their species, to continue their culture. And he ends up being Lionel's mentor, even in death. All right, so for the purposes of this video and this discussion about the Thundercats, I'm not going to go in depth with a review of each of these guys. It'd be way too long. I will go over Articulation with Lionel because he is pretty much the standard design and function as far as articulation goes. So I will go over it with him so you see it. Nearly everyone's articulation is very similar to his. Most of the bodies are very similar unless you're starting to get into the more complicated designs of characters. So aesthetically here, this is Lionel, again, Lord of the Thundercats. Funny part is with him is that in that first episode, he was a kid, and then they went into stasis pods while Jaga drove the ship to Third Earth. And in the meantime, he grew up, and he comes out being an adult, but he still has a childlike mind. So he's getting used to, not being a kid anymore and having to be mature and make decisions and stuff. It's actually pretty good how they develop his character over time, especially for a show back in the 80s where they sometimes didn't waste time on that sort of stuff. So these Thundercats are absolutely jacked, like diesel, muscled up, completely in shape, and that's just how they all look, as you can see here. And this is very reminiscent of the Motu Classics line. Everybody was muscled up, everybody was jacked. That's just how they designed the characters. And I want to say Four Horsemen sculpted these guys. So here's Lionel and a couple of his accessories, which I'll run through accessories very quickly later. But there's Lionel, Lord of the Thundercats. All right, next up we have Mamra. So, cool thing about these Thundercats from Super 7 is that if you get a caped figure, you get a cloth cape, and then you also get a, plastic rubber cape. So depending on what you prefer, you can use either one. So that's very, very nice that they do that. Now, this Mumm-ra figure, his articulation is actually a little bit different than somebody like a Lionel or a regular Thundercat. He is very spindly, and he's not really meant to be posed up and moving around a whole lot. When he's in this form, he's kind of just walking around like a disabled person and doing a little bit of magic and making speeches and such. But he looks the part. He looks exactly like he did in the cartoon. Next up, we'll take a look at Jaga. So in the first episode, Jaga is the main person. He's the main person speaking. He's moving the plot along. He is the venerated, elder that is taking care of the Thundercats as they try to escape Panthera. Throughout the show, he ends up showing up as kind of like a Force ghost, like in Star Wars. He shows up and he gives Lionel advice and things like that. He's passed away, but his presence is still felt through his ghost. And he also comes with a rubber cape along with this cloth wired one. So there is Jaga. All right, next we'll have a look at Jackalman. And he is a mutant from the planet Plundar. And he is also on Third Earth with a few of the other mutants. They end up working with Mamra to concoct schemes to try to get the Sword of Omens from Lionel and try to take out the Thundercats. And he is a little bit different as far as his construction goes. He is more angular as far as his muscle structure and such, but the articulation scheme is still pretty much the same. Very excellent sculpt on here. You can see those little details for fur, and his face sculpt is excellent. Very well done. All right, let's have a look at Panthero. All right, so Panthero. So when Lionel is a kid and they're escaping from Panthera, Panthero is one of the already grown-up Thundercats that is on the flagship, and they are tasked with, shepherding and mentoring the young Lionel so that he can become the new Lord of the Thundercats. Panthero is a lot of people's favorite Thundercat for several reasons. He had a cool voice. He had nunchucks, and he was like the tough, strong guy. And he had the great honor of being the person who drove the Thunder Tank and who created the Thunder Tank, which Super 7 is coming out with one. It's a bit pricey, but it's going to be freaking awesome. So if you're into the Thundercats, it's going to be very hard for you to pass on that Thunder Tank because it's immaculate looking. But here's Panthero. And again, a lot of people, if they're a Thundercat fan, you ask them who was their favorite Thundercat, oftentimes Panthero is the one. Again, very basic as far as his body goes, his body parts, the parts that they use. Very similar to Lionel. Many of the Thundercats share a lot of the same body parts. All right, so like I said, I'm going to run through articulation just with Lionel so you can get the gist of how they stack up as far as articulation goes. I believe the head is just on a ball peg. There is no hinge or anything in the neck. Lionel can look up decently well, especially considering he has all his hair. And he can look down. And obviously he has side to side, and he has a little bit of tilt. Your arms are... And I must say, I'm very shocked and surprised at how smooth these joints are. Because to be honest, this articulation setup is kind of dated. It's not modern by any stretch of the imagination, but it's for what it does, for what it is, it's very good. And the articulation movement is very smooth. Like nothing is loose, but nothing's tight either. So you have your regular shoulder joints. You do have a bicep swivel here. You're only single jointed at the elbows. You got hinges at the wrist for these hands, and I don't think the other ones have any kind of different setup. No, it doesn't look like it. You have the ab crunch, which is okay. You do have a waist twist. You have joints here for your legs. There is a little bit of a thigh rotation up in there. It can go out decently far. You can go back a decent amount. You can kick forward. It is hindered by this loin piece. Single jointed knee. And then you have forward facing pin for some good ankle movement. So again, is this the best articulated figure ever? No, not by any stretch of the imagination. But for what it is, it does what it's supposed to do, and it does it pretty well. As far as the construction of the figure itself, the hands are made of a soft kind of plastic, and it's kind of weird because it's not gummy, but it's a lot softer than, say, a G.I. Joe Classified or a Thalaverse or a McFarlane or something like that. And it lends itself to be able to, hold stuff easier. You can put it in there easier. You don't have to worry about trying to force things in. And when you take out the hand from the wrist to change out, like to put his claw shield on, it's very easy. It's very smooth. So I do like how these guys are constructed. All right, so now we'll do a quick rundown of accessories. I have been pleasantly surprised and impressed with how much accessories you get with each of these figures. So first we'll talk about Mamra's accessories. So he gets 2 extra hands, and he gets this staff here. It's a very evil looking scepter. You get his previously mentioned rubberized version of his cape. Then you get an urn of sorts, a artifact, a necklace here, another head with him screaming, and then I believe this is the hilt to a sword or something like that. I forget which one that goes to. But all that stuff showed up in the cartoon. On to Panthero's accessories. He comes with this key. This is another artifact as far as stuff that showed up in the cartoon. His welding goggles. He is also a good mechanic. Alternate head. Some other piece of machinery. It looks like a detonator, but I don't think that's what it was. You got a big old wrench, a blowtorch, a communicator, I believe that is. You have this one nunchuck because that connects to the spinning one. And then you have your 4 extra hands. So that makes 6 for him as far as hands go. And then he also has the nunchucks that he has with him. Moving on to Jackalman. He gets this big axe, a laser gun of sorts, two more hands, another gun, a big rifle, and then his alternate head. And then also his club. So, Jaga's accessories, you have an alternate head here, which him looking very old. This is how he looked like right before he passed away. Then you have another alternate head without his helmet. You have him using some type of power. There's a hand connected to that. You have 2 versions of the Sword of Omens. The Sword of Omens starts out small and then grows as it gets powered up. So you got a full version and the smaller version. His rubber cape. And then he also has 4 extra hands. So for a guy who is a ghost most of the show, they really gave him a lot of stuff, which I appreciate. Okay, so last but not least, we have the Lord of the Thundercats and his accessories. So alternate head with him gritting the teeth, getting ready for battle. This claw shield that he carries has several different forms. In fact, they give you 4 different ones. This one with the sword still in it. This one with the sword out of it. That one you can connect to his hand. The one with the sword in it, you can connect to his hip. Then you have the and these ones are the ones that are more detailed. Whereas these ones are the more smooth ones. You have this one, and then the one that he has on right now. So they did an excellent job of including the different versions of the claw shield. And I want to say that's based on, this is like the cartoon version, and this one is based on the original toy version, if I'm not mistaken. Then you have 4 extra hands for him as well, a Book of Omens artifact, and then obviously the Sword of Omens. So they come with a plethora of accessories. Okay, so to wrap this up, let's quickly talk about size and scale. The Ultimates Thundercats, I would say, are 7-inch scale, but it's a very, very conservative 7-inch. I think I measured Lionel earlier with the ruler, and he came out to be, if you would estimate where the top of his head actually would be, it came out to be about 6.5, 6 3/4 inches. So, and he's about the standard size as far as the Thundercats go. So they're between 6.5 to 7 inches tall, depending on who you get. If you get Mamra in his powered up form, that's like a 9-inch figure because he's supposed to be huge. And then him in his tiny form, he's probably only like 5.5 inches or 6 inches tall. But here's Lionel with some mythic legions. You got Atlas the Conqueror here, and you have Malleus, which is one of the skeleton guys. I could see them, you could use these guys together and it wouldn't look ridiculous. Mythic Legions does tend to look a little bit more realistic, whereas the Thundercats are more of a cartoon aesthetic. But I definitely could see this working, especially if you're talking about going up against the, skeletons and vampires and things like that. All right, and then to round out some size comparisons, we have Beta Ray Bill and the Retro Hercules, some bigger Marvel Legends, and they fit right in. That doesn't look crazy at all. I could see Thundercats showing up in Asgard and hanging out with Thor. It's something you could look at as far as, cross-pollinating or whatever the case. All right, so final thoughts on these guys. It's probably pretty obvious. I'm really digging the Thundercat line. Let's see, how do I put this? I was not confident that I was going to love Super 7 stuff, but I'm a huge Thundercats fan, so it was easy to take the chance on it. And then once I got one in my hand, I knew it was over after that. So again, like I said, they're not the most modern action figures. If you're looking for highly articulated setup with multiple ab crunches and double jointed elbows and knees, you're not going to find that here. But what you are going to find is excellent sculpts. These guys look like they walked off of the screen because they look exactly like they did in the cartoon for the most part. And very good construction, like sturdy and not flimsy, stiff joints, but smooth joints. Zero heating up of anything when I pick these guys up to move them around. So, there's a give and a take with certain figures. And if this is something that you're into, you might want to think about getting some of these. As far as prices go, the average price I would say for a Thundercats figure is $50. But you can find them on sale in different places, even like at Amazon, things like that. I've gotten most of mine for under $50. Some of them for way below $50. So look around, shop around, see what you got available to you. All right. Any questions or anything like that? Like, comment, subscribe. Let me know. I will answer. I will talk to you about them and take it from there. Later.